Lieutenant Colonel retired Tan Siew Soo, commissioned in December 1958 from regular intake 1, Federation Military College. I was commissioned into the Armored Car Regiment, which became the Reconnaissance Corps in 1960. In 1960, September, we were part of the Malayan Special Force deployed with the United Nations in the Congo. I served 2 tours in the Congo. The first one was from September 1960 to July 1961, and the second one was from June 1962 to April 1963. And this is the flag I used during my first tour in the Congo. The Congo, I call it the heart of Africa. Congo is surrounded by 9 countries. It's the only country with the most border with the other countries. We have Sudan in the north, Central African Republic, Congo, Brazzaville, Angola in the south, Zambia, Uganda on the east, Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania. The beginning of the Congo started in 1885 with the Berlin Conference. Can you imagine in 1885 at the Berlin Conference, the Europeans carved out the whole of Africa for themselves. Now you got the British in Kenya, in Sudan, in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe and Zambia, and South Africa. The Germans, they were in Tanganyika, Tanzania now, Namibia, Southwest Africa. The Portuguese, Angola, Mozambique. Of course, the French have got Northern Africa, all the the Arab countries, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria. And further south, they have Cameroon, Central African Republic, Guinea. So you see, Africa was already carved out in the at the end of 19th century. And of all the countries, Congo became the personal property of King Leopold II. A country which is about 905,000 square miles, which is 80 times the size of Belgium, controlled by a personal king. There were a lot of abuses, and in the end, in 1908, the country took over. Then it was known as Belgian Congo. Prior to that, it was called the Congo Free State. And it is the second largest country today in Africa. Previously, Sudan was bigger, but Sudan has since split up into South Sudan and Sudan. So now, Congo is the second largest country. In 1960, they had a population of about 16.5 million. And Malaya then was about 6 million. And today, there are about 80 million people there. It's a huge country, and it is so rich, full of mineral resources, copper, cobalt, coltan, diamond, gold, zinc, you name it, they have got it. And I would classify it as the richest country in Africa, even richer than South Africa, if not the world. And as BBC reported, the country wealth is too good for the country. That's why they have all these troubles now. And if it has been properly administered and ruled, it will be one of the greatest countries in Africa today. It is also the only country in Africa with 2 time zones. Time zone Bravo, time zone Charlie. Towards the end of, after World War II, there were a lot of nationalism. People want independence. See, like India got independent, we got independent, and it was the same with Africa. In fact, Ghana, which was then known as Gold Coast, had independence before Malaya. Then, following that, the people in Congo also agitated for independence. And the Belgium, I think they got sort of a panic, because in January 1959, there was a big riot, a few hundred people were killed. And then, from then on, they realized that they cannot hold on any more longer, they got to give independence. So, in 1960, January, they called for conference, they call it round table conference in Brussels. So all the grouping, the tribal associations were represented, and prominent among them were the characters, the personalities. So number one, Patrice Lumumba. He founded the movement National Congolese, the Congolese National Party. And then there was Joseph Kasavubu, who was grouping called Abaco. He was more popular in the lower Congo because his tribe is tribal. And then the other one is Katanga, Moise Chombe. He was his tribal grouping, his party called Konakat, and he was very powerful there. So they have election in May 1960. June 1960. As normal, there was no clear-cut majority. The only party that shows some resemblance of popularity in the whole country is Lumumba's party, the MNC. But they only won 37 seats out of 137. And then the others had about a dozen seats or half a dozen seats. So obviously they got to have a coalition government. So a lot of joking, maneuvering going on after the result, and they decided on Patrice Lumumba became Prime Minister, Joseph Kasavubu became President. So Kasavubu President, Lumumba, and the others were also got into the coalition government. And that went on. June the 30th is their Independence Day, 1960. 4 days later, the army mutinied. The army started with the Independent Brigade located at a place called Ticeville, which is halfway between the port of Matadi and Leopoldville. They started mutinying, and then it spread. And so the president and the prime minister had to go around and pacify them. Then the biggest camp in the city, Leopoldville, called Camp Leopold, they also mutinied. So when they mutinied, the Belgian officers wanted to go and thought they can handle them. Instead, they were arrested. They arrested the white officers and detained them. By the way, prior to independence, the army was called Force Publique. They had a strength of about 23,000 with over 1,000 Belgian officers. There were no Congolese officers at all. The highest rank they could get on was Sergeant Major. That's all. Then we cannot go further. So that was the main problem. And this mutiny in Camp Leopold, they went to see the Prime Minister Lumumba. They demanded the removal of the Belgian commanders, the officers, and they want to be upgraded one rank, increase the pay. So at first they were dismissed. Then later the Mumbai saw the seriousness of it. The next day, agreed and sacked the Belgian commander of the Force Public, Lieutenant General Jensen, I think his name. He was sent back. But they have no officers. So everybody become one rank higher, and they become a mockery. There was no private soldiers in the army. Everybody was wanted. Actually, they all wanted a higher pay. And that was the starting of the trouble. And then the country started looting, a lot of chaos, rape, and then the Belgian flew in about 3,000 of the soldiers from Brussels, came in. The reason is to protect the Belgian national, and they managed to disarm the Congolese soldiers. That was on the 10th day after independence. And then to make it worse, on the 11th day, July the 11th, Katanga decided to declare independence. Katanga is the richest province in the whole of Congo. At that time, there were only 6 provinces when we went there in the early 60s. Now, I think there are about 25 provinces. They have expanded, they have shrunk now, I cannot keep in touch. So, to aggravate the problem, now we have got, it is more than a normal domestic quarrel now, independence for Katanga, and the country is running chaos. And that's where the President and the Prime Minister approached the United Nations for help. They want UN to come and intervene and restore order. And the first troops that came in before our arrival were the Ghanaians, the Tunisian, Moroccan, those around Africa. And surprisingly, the Indians were there before us. They sent the Siliwangi division. They were there when we arrived. And we only got involved in August 1916, where the UN Secretary Dag Hammarskjöld sent telegram to our Prime Minister Tunku Abdurrahman to ask for our contribution. And then there was some haggling going on. The initial offer was we want to send one company, 120 men. And then they said it's too few, and then they said expand. In the end, we settled for the first Malayan Special Force of 613 all rank, and I was involved in that. And that force was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Ungkul Nazaruddin, who later became our Chief of General Staff. So we were the first to arrive. And, okay, so this is the background. Now, the Malayan Special Force was formed. In fact, we gathered at Imphal camp on the 12th of September. First Special Force was made up of 4 Royal Malay, A, B, C company only. They left out D company. And then the headquarters company was virtually there, and they reinforced with ordnance, SMC, supply transport officer, and the workshop into they call it a force headquarters, not the company, the force headquarters. And then C Squadron 2 Recce, that's where I came in. C Squadron 2 Recce was commanded by Zain Hashim, and the normal establishment was 1, 2, 3 scout car troop, and 1 rifle troop. But for this particular one, we had reinforcement from 1 Recce in Sungai Udang. They came in and joined us. So we had a peculiar establishment there. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4 was a scout troop, and number 5 was a rifle troop. You don't find this organization with the later units. we were there from the 12th doing intensive training, and on the 28th of September, the whole lot of the real elements, the armored element plus the 3 tonners of the infantry, all motored down to our Woodlands, Royal Malaysian Navy base at Woodlands to wait for the LSC, you know the LSC picture? LSC. And we waited there for a couple of days. Then the 2 LSC came from Philippines, and we loaded all the vehicles. And the next day, on the 3rd of October, no, 2nd of October, we departed Singapore and came to Port Klang, Port Swettenham then. And there, the main elements were all there, waiting for the departure. So we landed, we joined them at the wharf, at the pier there, and the address was by our Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman. After the ceremony over, we boarded the ship. It was a grand send-off. Our young Air Force sent their twin pioneer fly over in salutation. So began our most memorable journey to Matadi, port of Matadi. Congo had one port, Matadi, and they had a very narrow strip of land enclosed by Gabon and Angola, and the port is there, Matadi. Matadi is not on the coast, it is some 100 miles, about 150 kilometers upstream, up on the river Congo. Okay, on the 3rd of October, we embarked on the 2 LSPs at Port Klang, Port Sudan there, for a most memorable journey of 28 days non-stop to the port of Matadi on the Atlantic Ocean. Now the journey was very interesting. We headed northwest and beautiful, and once we passed Aceh, the Indian Ocean became really very rough, and that's where we all get mabuk, you know. And then on the 4th day, we crossed the equator, and the U.S. Navy has got a great tradition of ranking people who cross the equator for the first time. So we didn't include the other ranks because there are too many of them, and maybe some of them cannot take it. Only the officers and the senior ranks were involved. And surprisingly, there were so many U.S. sailors who had never crossed the equator before up to that time, you know. So they were there together with us, and we were really wrecked. Early morning, announcement over the PA system came in, ordered us to go into the deck below for a special breakfast. So we all went there, and then we had to wear our shirt upside down, and I remember the coffee or tea was sprinkled with tomato ketchup. And then after that announcement, we had to go up deck on the tank deck, and there the ritual began. One of the most interesting one was, there was a King Neptune. We selected one sailor, King Neptune, seated like this on top, and his belly, bare belly, smeared with grease. So we had to crawl with his belly and kiss his belly. So, as we approached, you will contract his stomach. And when we were there, you let go, you know. Imagine the crease on your face. That was one of it. And then, it was tough, but it was funny, and it was like a good break, you know. Momentarily, seasickness was forgotten. At the end of the crossing of the equator ceremony, all participants were given a very beautiful certificate by the U.S. Navy, and this is my copy. this is only a prototype, but the original is much bigger and it's beautiful color. And then there was a time when we were crossing in the direction of Mauritius. The Indian Ocean became so calm, it's unbelievable. It was so calm for about 2 or 3 days. And then the naval officer, US Navy officer pointing me there, that direction is Mauritius. So, and we took the opportunity to bring out our Browning machine gun, test fired into the ocean. And then the captain of the ship, he had his clay pigeon gadget. He took it out, tried to, and I was given a chance, and I managed to shoot clay pigeon. Very interesting. And then we were also shooting into the rifleman shooting the balloon. That was the only time we could do our shooting. Then everything back to normal, became seasick. And then when we passed the Cape of Good Hope, that's where everything was topsy-turvy. So the sea was so rough. It was a big storm. I don't know what gale force was. Definitely very strong. And the ship was going line ahead. 1 minute you can see the ship in front, which 1170, down. Next minute it was up there, and then in between you see the big waves. And I was very lucky. I was the duty officer of the day. They call it the officer of the day, which is the duty officer. I was at the bridge. The others were all down in the thing, all the hatch closed. The captain said, anybody who dropped, sorry, impossible to rescue. So I was up there, had a beautiful view, and no seasick, surprisingly. And talking of seasickness, it's really seasick because when we vomit, it was green in color. Our vomit, not white, green. And you talk to the sailor, they will tell you, yeah, that is normal. Because very, very seasick. And so we passed the Cape of Good Hope, and everything was normal again, all back to monotony. Then I think we were somewhere off the Angola coast. One morning we wake up, we saw a beautiful sight. Dolphins were swimming side by side with us. There were 40 or 50 of them. Oh, there was a display, there was an aromatic display of dolphins. And surprisingly, it went on throughout the whole day and the night. Next morning we got up, hey, they were still there following us. They could keep up with us because our LSD was maximum 14 knots, very slow. And we were doing about 10 to 12 knots. So they were keeping up. Then on the third day, we woke up, they disappeared. They were no more there. So that was there. And then we proceeded again, nothing, see nothing but a big horizon. And then one fine morning, we saw a lone eagle flying. You would say eagle or what kind of bird? I think it's an eagle. That would signify that the land is near. True enough. Then we sighted the mouth of the river Congo. Right. Early morning on the 31st of October. And there to meet us, pilot boat was waiting there to guide us up the river. There were 4 officers. Our CO, Colonel Nazaruddin, the adjutant Raja Amancha, Captain Raja Amancha, the force paymaster Major Raja Saigon, and the quartermaster Musa, Captain Musa Alam, 4 of them. They were the advance party. They left after us, but they flew to London, and from London, I don't know whether they got connecting flight or they went to Brussels and took the Sabina airline into Leopoldville. It took them 4 days to get to Leopoldville, but they were still ahead of us. So they came and so on to LS3, the CO and the paymaster was in the first LSP 1170. the one adjutant, Aman Shah, came into my boat, and he was telling us a story, what would happen to us. We were going to be on retraining for 3 weeks in Leopoldville, and then after that we will be deployed to Kasai in support of the Ghanaian Brigade. So that was the story. And as we go up, we arrived around 1700 in the evening, and at the port of Matadi, we had guard of honor formed by the Moroccan soldiers. And after the guard of honor over, straight away we unload the thing onto the train, and there were 3 trains scheduled for the capital, Leopoldville. Leopoldville, Kinshasa today, is another 365 kilometers away. So at that time in my mind I thought that Port Klang, KL, very near. But this was 365 kilometers, you've got to travel the whole night to get there. The first train ferried all the infantrymen, plus our Iraqi scout troop. They all went the first train, passengers only. Second train was all the scout cars, mine. And third train was the B echelon with the heavy vehicles. They failed to take off until 2 days later. The first train went in, just before the city, they got derailed. Very fortunately, there were no accidents, no casualties. We were very thank our lucky star, and that caused several hours of delay. So my second train came and halted at the railway halt of kilometer 236. As a result of the first train derailment, the second train, which was my train, we were halted at the railway halt of kilometer 236, meaning we had traveled 236 kilometers from Matadi. Okay, after 6 hours, which was then about noon, 12 noon, we started moving towards the city. So we moved, and I would like to mention that the ferrets were catered for in the wagon. We were put onto the railway wagon, 2 ferrets into one, and the way it was secured by means of only wire, quite thick wire, and the way the train was traveling so fast, it was we were lucky that there were no accidents, that the thing didn't break off. Okay, then we moved, and as we arrived just short on the outskirts of the city, at the big railway yard called Limite, we were abandoned. The whole lot of us were abandoned, and we found out later that was the beginning, the first day of a 3-day strike, railway and port strike, the port, river port, Leopoldville. So there were 3 days of strike. So when we arrived, they just dump us there, we disappeared. And this railway yard is so huge that surrounded by miles of link fence, shading fence, We could see cars moving on the road, but we don't know where to go. And in this group was 4 young troop leaders. Myself, Philip Lee, Steve Bobian, and Yu Seichi, all troop leaders, now 1, 2, 3, 4. But before we left Matadi, the squadron leader, Major Zain Hashim, has told me verbally that I was in charge. All same seniority, 3 same seniority. So, but because I was number 1 troop leader, so you are in charge. So we were landed there, we didn't know what to do. No food, no ration, Before we left that night at railway station Matadi, we were given 2 big bottles of soda water. That's all we had. We don't know why soda water, but we were given to them. Those days got no mineral water, only soda water. And then when we were stranded at the railway hall, our food was Congolese mango. Lucky for us, the area has got a lot of mangoes. Although they were not ripe, they were green, but they were not sour. You could eat them quite well. And when we arrived at this railway yard, you may see, it was easily, you combine our Brickfields railway yard and the Central railway combined. I think this is about 10-20 times bigger. So I was thinking to myself, now what do we do? So I got out my squad mate, I said, come, let's go and find a way to go up. So we walked all the fence after some time walking, and we found a hole. Not somebody has broken the link fence. We crawled into the road, and just lucky for us, we saw the first jeep that came across was a UN jeep. We stopped, and it was Ghanaian soldiers. They could speak English, and it was heaven sent to us. And told them that we want to be sent to the UN headquarters. So they took us there, and then we met our officers for the first train. Met my OC, and then came back. But that's how we passed our first night in the Congo. In the railway yard, all by ourselves. So, next day, the train pilot came very early. He wanted to take us into the city to unload. When he came, because of this strike, there were quite a handful of workers there, stopped him from getting the train to drivers. It was quite serious. So my OC Zain Hashim called it a big bluff, He told the few drivers around him, cock your gun. We had 10 guns those days. Cock. Oh, taken aback. They were very serious. So they allowed the drivers to drive us into the railway station. And at the railway station, we managed to unload all our vehicles. And by 4 p.m., we were ready to go back to go into our first camp. And it was a good PR exercise. We got our senior liaison officer, Major Desmond Fernie. He came with his. He had a Volkswagen Beetle, and then Major Zain Hashim said only the ferrets will be involved, no Land Rover. So all the 18 ferrets lined up, led by Zain Hashim, number 1. I was number 3. Number 7 was Philip Lee, and then after that was Siwobian, and Joseph was last. 18 ferret in a line, long, thin, protection green color at that time, our ferret. And when we passed the UN headquarters, we didn't know at that time, the Supreme Commander was at his office looking down smiling. But what was very obvious were the staff of the UN. They all came out to the balcony and waved at us. That was really good. And that was the time where I really feel proud of my uniform and the regiment I belonged, So when we passed there, we went to our first camp, Ozone camp. It was a para-commando camp, Belgian para-commando. Apparently, some of the Congolese thought that the Belgians were still there. So they were. The first night, which I was still in the railway yard, they came, they wanted to go into the camp, and they were stopped by Second Lieutenant Burhan Ahmad, who later became the Chief of Defense. Because they thought we were harboring the Belgians. But it was paratroop commando camp, not suitable for us. So we were there for about 2 days, and then we moved further towards the UN headquarters, and we were moved to a camp called Chanik camp. It was an old foundry, and there we got our fellows were all properly accommodated. We were now established at our camp in Kinshasa called Camp Chanik. And then it has been the intention of our CO to have a presentation parade for the UN Supreme Commander. So it was scheduled for 22nd of November, 1960. But a very, very interesting event happened on the 21st of November, This on 21st November, I was the duty officer in the camp, in camp training. The only officer, the others were all either they were deployed out or in the officers' mess. And this incident of the Congolese soldiers and the Ghanaian ambassador. You see, when Mobutu came to power, he declared the UN ambassador of Ghana persona non grata. He gave him 48 hours to leave the country. But this ambassador was very defiant because he had one platoon of Tunisian soldiers guarding his residence. So he thought he was quite safe. And the Congolese was very fuming mad with him. So they were trying to evict him by force. And I was the only duty officer in camp at that time. So by evening, the Congolese increased the strength. They surrounded the residence. But before that, the Tunisians already boosted up the strength to about 200 men from one platoon. So they were expecting trouble. And then the Congolese came in with a few more truckloads of soldiers and surrounded the place. And you know the thing is going to blow up anytime. So around evening, maybe about 1900 hours, really exploded. There were tracers from my place. I could see tracers in the sky. There was a lot of shooting. And then the two Tunisian or senior officers came to me and he wanted my armored escort. So straight away I told him, the answer is no, but I didn't tell him cannot. I said, you better call my squadron leader, Major Zain Hashim, in the officers' mess. And he never came back after that. And in the firing, the Congolese brought in one Greyhound armored car, armed with a 37mm gun. Instead of shooting at the Ghanaian ambassador house, they fired one round and the round went into the next house, which was the officers' mess of the Canadian Signals Regiment. Officers were having dinner at that time, about 8 o'clock, I think. And then this round, instead of hitting the Ghanaian, went into the Canadian officers' mess, went through the ceiling and caused a total blackout. So the officers died for cover, and that was the end of the dinner. And this was told to me by one of the Canadian officers later. And there were a lot of indiscriminate wild shooting. So next morning, 7 a.m., ceasefire. No more shooting. They count the dead. The Tunisians only suffered 2 killed. There were many wounded, but 2 killed. And the Congolese got many wounded, but they got 4 killed. And among the 4 was the garrison commander of the Leopoldville garrison, Colonel Kokolo, full colonel. And so tension after that was very, very high in the Leopoldville, because there were rumors circulating that the Congolese are going to take revenge, they're going to attack the UN headquarters. And then they got armored cars. We haven't got a rocket launcher. Our rocket launcher, brilliant planning by Mindef, were all left behind in Malaya, in the camp. So what we did was the UN summoned the Indonesians. The Indonesians were stationed in Equator in the north. They had 75mm recoilless gun mounted on a China-made jeep. So they sent 2 detachments to us. Straight away, they came down and attacked to us. And the funny thing about the Indonesian culture is, both officers second lieutenant, but they had about more than 10 years service. And they told us, if the soldiers misbehave, we can slap them. That is a shock to us, because that's not our culture, you know. The soldiers allow that, and they accept it. They can get slapped, they can get beaten by the officer. So what happened was, the UN summoned one company, rifle company, and one troop, armored car, into the UN headquarters at the basement, car park. So we were there, but we rotate every day, every 24 hours we rotate. And the soldiers quickly nicknamed the place the dungeon because it's so unhealthy, you know. In the basement, we were sleep there. And then after that, things cooled down, tension lessened, and we managed to hold our presentation parade to the Supreme Commander on the 9th of December 1960. And this is the picture. This is part of the parade. Part of the parade, a most beautiful, impeccable parade. You know, I'm very, very impressed with it. And I would classify it as one of the two parades which I remember in my head forever. The first one I took part was the end of emergency parade, Malayan emergency in KL, where everybody took part, the Commonwealth forces, the Home Guard, the police, everybody, and we were there. And this is the second parade. It was so beautiful. And of course, it was only all the UN officials and ambassadors, and there was quite tense, and of course we don't like to be stationed at the car park of the basement, you know. So, but the UN staff was so happy. They said, we feel so safe with you all here, you know, but we were so glad. And then the UN Secretary General came. It was Jack Marshall at the time he came, and there were a lot of UN Congolese protests. So what they did was they just sent out this company. The landing pad was just behind the headquarters. Sent the company out. Everybody dispersed, and then the Secretary General would come to the office quite safe. So that is the episode. No, sorry. I'm now on the parade. The parade, the significant part was General Mobutu. Mobutu, by that time, was already the de facto leader of the Congo. As a result of coup d'etat, he assumed power. And his famous thing was he boycotted all the UN functions. But this particular function he set up. So that says something about it. And I think because we get it, the information went to them was we were successful in beating the communists in the first emergency. And I remember this, there was an Indian major called Major Kopan. He was in the PR. And he had been to Malaya during the BMA time. And he was the one who was propagating our information to the local, you know, that we were successful, we beat the communists, and Mobutu was very anti-communist, so he probably liked us, and he came for the function. Then, Patrice Lumumba, he was already arrested or in a house arrest, confined to his residence. And we had, originally before we came, the Ghanaians were guarding him, then the Tunisians, and when we came, our platoon took over, and the platoon was commanded by Second Lieutenant Burhan Ahmad, our Burhan. So we sort of protect him from being captured by the Congolese soldiers. The Congolese soldiers further ahead, they established a roadblock to prevent him from escaping. It was a very funny situation. Then, one fine day, and it was a fateful day in the annals of the Congo, 27th of November, he escaped. Lumumba and his entourage escaped. You know how he escaped? His house, the back was like a river Congo, and in the still of the night, it was all arrangement with the UN sanction. So he escaped by boat. And then for 3 days he was on the run. The Congolese were sending a helicopter to look for him, couldn't find him. And he went as far as a place called Fort Franklin. of this man, Fort Frankie in Kasai province. And there, unfortunately, the soldiers caught up with him. First, there was one Land Rover that came, and Lumumba thought he could talk to him. Lumumba is a rebel rouser, he could talk, he could talk his way out. Because he was already on the boat crossing, and then, but his wife and family was still on the home bank. So he came back, thought he could talk, but after that, 2 more truckloads of soldiers came. That's the end of it. They captured him, sent him to, from Fort Frankie, sent him back to Angeli Leopoldville Airport, manhandled, bound his hand, and very, very sad. The elected president, and this was done by Mobutu's men. And Mobutu, when on independence, was given the rank of full colonel, chief of staff of the army, by Lumumba, because he was working for Lumumba's political party and stationed in Brussels. He was then a journalist, retired sergeant major. So Lumumba was captured, and once Lumumba, the news came he was captured, a lot of protests again. And I saw the last picture of Lumumba alive. This picture was captured all over the world by BBC, by this newspaper, that newspaper, manhandled. And by stroke of luck, because we knew he was going to be sent to Ticeville, in front of our camp, the main road runs to Ticeville, which is the home of the Independent Brigade. So I was talking to Lieutenant Teo Seiji, 2 of them. 2 of us were talking there, and then there was this truck with Lumumba there on top. Very close, people close by, very, say maybe 10, 20 feet away on the road. Very pathetic. Fully elected Prime Minister of the country was handled that way. So he was sent to Ticeville, and then on the 17th of January, they felt very insecure because he could talk his way out from the being captured. Then they sent him to Katanga to his arch enemy, Moise Chombe. 17th of January. In fact, he was killed there and then. The aircraft from Leopoldville took a few hours to Elizabethville. Few hours, and during the journey, he was already bashed up. They really hammered him. And when he arrived in the evening at Elizabethville, they took him out, they tortured him some more, and then they executed him by firing squad. You know, really, and it's a gruesome murder, and this was confessed by one of the Belgian police officers. Cut his body up, dissolved in acid so that there's no trace. And before that, extracted 2 of his teeth as a souvenir. And this came out. And today, I don't know whether they got it or not, Lumumba's daughter fighting the Belgian government to claim back the 2 teeth. I didn't follow after that. I don't know what happened, whether she got it or not. But that was the story. News 17, he was killed. Total blackout. The information, only announcement came on the 17th, on the 13th of February. What 3 weeks later? So the news of Lumumba's death was announced much later on the 13th of February. And when the announcement came, there was turmoil all over the world, especially in Afro-Asia. Big demonstration, not so much in our country, but even in Serbia, there was a big demonstration, 100,000 people demonstrated. And then all the Afro-Asian countries, very sympathetic to him. And then there was a lot of demonstration. And then our camp became the refugee camp, our Chinese camp. Because by then, about half the soldiers were flown off to Kindu. I was the rear party, and together with T. Bobian, second lieutenant, I was more senior. And they came in. So we gave them stay and included Lumumba's wife and the children. And his ex-minister's family were there. So that was coming in. And then I still remember this, on the 16th of February, they were escorted by me, escorted out at 3 a.m., escorted to NGD Airport to be sent home by UN aircraft to Stanleyville, where the home base. In fact, Lumumba was trying to make for Stanleyville his home to rally support, but he didn't make it. Halfway he was caught and killed. So that was the family. By then our soldiers were all out, except for my rear party. Then Tureki came. Tureki, the remainder, because of 6th Corner part Tureki, but A, B, and the rest of the regiment came. They arrived in end of April 1961. And B Squadron, under command of Arthur Chan, flew direct from Mombasa straight to Leopoldville, took over from me. And then I came to Goma to join them. And the main party, very interesting. In fact, I just written on the WhatsApp. He traveled from Mombasa all the way up to Nairobi into Kasese in Uganda, a 3-day journey. And from there, they motored all the way into Goma. That was less. This squadron took over Leopoldville. Then, after some time, the original C Squadron, before that, there was a big incident in Nyunzu, a place called Nyunzu. But it's not the Asian, northern Katanga. This is Ibu Katanga, and just here, south. In fact, I've written an article called The Looming Battle of Nyunzu. You see, what happened was, in 1960 November, 8 Irish soldiers were killed in that area, that road, northern Katanga, by wild Baluba tribesmen. They were mistaken for Belgian, killed. And then after that, the whole region was declared neutral. That means the faction belonging to the Stanleyville government or Mobutu's government cannot come there. The Katangis also cannot. They leave the area except for UN. And then then Congo had basically 3 factions. The Leopoldville faction under Mobutu. The Stanleyville faction is Lumumba's stronghold under his deputy prime minister, a guy called Gizinga. And then the southern one is Katanga, which is Montstrombe. So what happened was, the soldiers from the north came down, crossed the area, and occupied one of the towns in northern Katanga. So Chombe was fuming mad. He said, this is supposed to be neutral. So he sent his soldiers and the mercenaries to clear them up. So they cleared them up, and he occupied a town called Congo. And at Lake Tanganyika, a place called Albertville, we had Irish battalion. At the other end of the in Caballo, we had Ethiopian battalion. And in between, nobody. So we were ordered, in between Albertville and Caballo was a place called Nyunzu. So we were ordered to go into Nyunzu. And Chombe announced to the world that no UN soldiers to enter Nyunzu. If they enter Nyunzu, they will be resisted by force. So they already woke up, and we were ordered to go. So from Pindu, it came down, Caballo, And then this battle group moved. Just one night before that, the place called Louisy, that was supposed to be forming up assembly area. And the soldiers were really praying hard. A lot of soldiers, Ashkar Melayu especially, our soldiers were all happy. So they just accepted. Because we were going in, and going into the unknown is always you are very fearful, because we don't know what's the strength. We know they were there, we know they were mercenaries, but we don't know what is the strength. So our scout car were leading A company, B company, and they were given instruction when we arrived there, A company left flanking, C company, and the one company go frontal. So when we arrived at a few hundred yards from the town, from the entrance into the town, stop. This is where I salute Tunku Nazaruddin. He took the risk to go in on his own, together with my OC. My OC was a Matsala major called Jeff Rutledge, Royal Tank. He can speak French. So he, one Land Rover, Nazaruddin, first Land Rover with the interpreter, and I think the RSO or IO was with him, plus the radio operator. So Nazaruddin's order to us was, if you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, you go in. That means the attack will have to go in. So when they went in, you know the funny place, that place has got a lot of anthill. You know, this little anthill bunker, they make a beautiful bunker. And then at entrance there were two of these. And then we stopped, Nazaruddin and my OC Land Rover, UN flag flying all the way in, and they flew all to them. Luckily no itchy finger. Itchy finger means there will be a battle. So they went in, Nazaruddin went to see the commander of the place is a Belgian commander of the Col Tan Siew Soo force. His rank is commandant. Commandant is a major. I told him no choice but to give us an area to occupy, which is under UN instruction. So, and then we hear the thing, we are so relieved that there was no battle. So this looming battle became a non-issue, because Nazaruddin took the risk to go in there on his own. No, he could have been shot, he could have been captured, but that's how we went in. So we went in there, we start digging. First thing is to dig trenches. And then morning, evening, 10-2. The funny thing was, the Kasangis also followed us. They also dig trenches. So when we stood to stand by, they also followed, and then aiming the gun at us. So we were a bit worried that some trigger-happy people would just press the trigger and then the whole thing will blow up. Luckily, there were none. No, there was no incident. And we really got on well with the Belgian officers. There were 3 Belgian officers there with the Kasangis soldiers. The OC and one was they call it the group mobile, which is like an armored element. And then there was another officer. So I asked this armored officer, was a lieutenant. I said, what would happen that morning if we have come in and there was a fight? He said, we will probably kill a few of your soldiers, but these men will run. He's very frank. He said these men will kabut. But thank God, nothing happened. From there, we stayed on for another few more weeks to be released by the Indian contingent. The Indian came in. You see, the Indian army earlier supported UN by having logistic soldiers, no combat. But this is the first time they're sending 1 brigade, because of the requirement. And we handed over to them, and we moved to Albertville. Now it's called Albertville is called Likasi. No, Albertville is called Kalemi. I got some pictures. This is my ferret. traveling from Nyunzu to Albertville, the kind of terrain we come across. Very rough. This is another one, the Land Rover. Before that, at Nyunzu, we were all standing to. This is one of the pictures of the Sentu, one of the centers. That's me. From Albertville, we were there for about a month. And then we were ordered to go up to join brigade headquarters in Bukavu. And this is a very interesting trip. We traveled in I did 3 trips, but this first one is the best. We were on a ship called Urundi, and we traveled from Albertville across to Kigoma in Tanganyika, Tanzania, and then from there we landed in Bujumbura now, in Burundi. It was a very nice trip. And from there we motored up, and there were two roads that you can connect from the northern tip of Lake Tanganyika into Bukavu. One, the Congolese one, is a horrible road, mountainous. This one is the Rwanda road, the Urundi road, also mountainous but beautifully tarmac. Type of country when we went through. Very hilly and nice view, mountainous. This is Lake Tanganyika. Although it's the lake, but you can get seasick, lake sick rather, because strong waves and strong wind. Albertville, this was our officers' mess. We took over this one of the old villas. Quite comfortable. Then from Usumbura, that night, the officers stayed in a hotel. It was a very good one. And next morning we moved into Bukavu, and this is Bukavu. The background building are our troops barrack. Now Bukavu is or was the headquarters Malayan Special Force Brigade, and this is the building where they operated from. It's an old castle. This castle, it seems that it was constructed by one of the Belgian administrators at his whims, a replica of one in Belgium. It was very comfortable, and those officers that served there must be having a good time. I stayed there for almost a month before I moved to Goma. Now, in Goma, we marry up with the regiment headquarters. They have already arrived in April 1961. They were already there. They came 6 months after the C Squadron. So they were there, and then we were together with them for a short while, about less than a month, I think. And then it's time for C Squadron to get back home. And from Goma, we flew back to Dar es Salaam. We flew to Dar es Salaam by DC-4, and from Dar es Salaam back to Port Rotherham by U.S. Naval troop ship Blatchford. This troop ship is a real comfortable one compared with the LSP, the one we traveled to the Congo. And this troop ship was the troop ship that ferried all Malaysian soldiers to and fro the Congo, Malaysia, after The previous one, which was called L Sims, which ferried to Reiki. But they are similar ships. Ship was quite stable compared to the LSC. No seasick at all. And the journey took us just a mere 10 days to get back to KL, to Malaya. So we arrived at the end of July 1961. Landed, and then there was a special train that took us back to KL, to railway station Kuala Lumpur. And the fantastic thing was, all along the way, people come out from the houses to wave at us. The journey from Port Klang to KL is probably about 14 kilometers. And all the way, you're spontaneous, nothing. They were informed that we were coming back and really give us a hero's welcome. And if there is anything to say that the reward of soldiering, that could be the reward. It's intangible, but it really affects you, and you feel so proud of serving your nation. And at the railway station, there was another big crowd with placard. But this time, it was unlike the Leopoldville days where they were having placards but going on demonstration. This was a friendly welcome home, and then we marched in, and the defense minister, Tun Razak, was the one who welcomed us back after his talk, and talk over. We said goodbye to 4 Royal Malay who went back to Mentakap camp, and we took 6 Warren went back to Sukala camp in Port Dickson. So that is the end of it.